What if insurance wasn't something you bought, but something that lived quietly in the background of your life? That is a question my guest today has been answering, not in theory, but in practice. Welcome to Scouting for Growth. I'm Sabine VdL, and today we are sitting down with Rob Schimek, Group Chief Executive Officer of bolttech, one of the world's fastest growing insurtechs, now operating across more than 35 markets and connecting millions of customers with protection seamless embedded into the digital ecosystems they already trust. When I last met with Rob's team, we were already speaking of $55 billion of underwriting premiums. We are at $70 billion today. Rob's journey reads like a masterclass in leadership through transformation. Before building bolttech in a global powerhouse, he led AIG's commercial insurance business worldwide, served as CEO of AIG Americas, and began his career as a partner at Deloitte, shaping financial institutions like MetLife and Prudential from the inside out. But here is what makes Rob fascinating. He's not just scaling an insurtech. He's redesigning the architecture of protection itself, bringing insurance to where people are, not where the industry wants them to be. In today's conversation, we'll explore how bolttech's connector model is redefining global insurance distribution from telcos to automakers and beyond. Why the future of protection will depend on trust, data, and design more than policy documents and premiums. And what leadership really looks like when you are building at the intersection of regulation, innovation, and human impact. So buckle up. This is not just a usual insurtech story. No. It is a story about connection, conviction, and the courage to reimagine what protection can be in the next decade. So let's dive in. Rob, welcome to Scouting for Growth. Rob, welcome to the Scouting for Growth podcast. Such a pleasure to have you with me today.
It is my pleasure to be with you. I love Scouting for Growth.
Oh, thank you. Well, I love going into context. So who is Rob? I know you have 30 years of experience in our industry. AIG being one of the first companies you have worked with, and now bolttech. So tell us about the story.
Yeah, so I'm a big believer in this Albert Einstein quote, or at least it's attributed to him, and that is that if you want to solve a problem and you had 1 hour, you would spend 55 minutes in the problem and then 5 minutes on the solution. And so the way I think about it is I've spent my career in the problem. I was a partner at Deloitte & Touche in the financial services industry, helped to take MetLife public, and then wanted to practice putting my hands on the wheel and went to AIG. And I was in that organization, and it's a great organization trying to do all the right things. But I was surely in the problem. And so when I had the opportunity to be a problem solver, I came out, and that was the formation of bolttech, which is the attempt to be the solution. So I'm in that smaller part of my career now. After the 55 minutes in the problem, now I'm in that solution finding. And I think that bolttech is the path that I've chosen to bring that solution to the marketplace.
I remember a few years back, I was sat in my home, and I received a call from a connection in the marketplace, actually. I think it's somebody you know and who has helped you find talent. And he says to me, Sabine, do you know bolttech? They are one of those companies which became a unicorn in 1 year. And I said, oh my God, I need to go and check the database. So tell us about the journey and what bolttech is trying to solve for.
So I love the journey that we're on. The very first thing I'll say is the vision of bolttech is that we really want to connect people with more ways to protect the things that they value. The mission that we're on is to try to help to close the global protection gap, right? So the problem that we're after is how do you close a multi-trillion-dollar protection gap that has existed for years, that's getting bigger, And in order to do that, I bring you back to this, do you really understand the problem? And so in doing that, we kind of think that there are 4 basic drivers for this multi-trillion-dollar protection gap. And those 4 drivers are pretty irrefutable, although you could say maybe there's 5 or 6 drivers. But let me start with these 4, I think we'll agree. And those 4 include that the population of the world is getting larger, the population of the world is getting older, that technology is evolving super fast, and of course, the Earth is getting warmer. And so if you take those 4 things and say they're pretty irrefutable, there were 2 billion people on the Earth 100 years ago, now there's 8. The average life expectancy was 43 years 100 years ago. Now it's in the 70s. The Earth temperature is pretty clear, and the pace of change of technology, which is fantastic, also presents for us lots of challenges, including cyber risk, etc. So I think if you take those 4 things, you say those are the problem set, and then you say, so what does bolttech try to do? What we're trying to do is we are trying to make a seamless connection between the providers of protection products, the insurers, and the distribution partners who have access to the customers, so we can put those solutions into the hands of the customers. And so bolttech's really here trying to provide tailored, affordable, accessible, and convenient insurance in the hands of the customer on a B2B2C basis, meaning that we're connecting big partners who have lots of customers to the insurance providers, and we don't own the customer. We're the intermediary trying to make that connection happen better, faster, smarter than ever before. And that's the way we're trying to solve this, because the more that we can make that solution or that connection frictionless, the more that the connection will happen, and the more that this protection gap will get closed.
So you have talked about 4 key levers, right? And at the same time, you are talking about a new way to distribute. So when we look at insurance, which is really about managing risk, how do we start redesigning an industry, which is, in your case, moving into connecting the right partners, a bit like Uber, you don't own the customer, into delivering tomorrow's protection products?
Yes. So one of the key things is that we are, in fact, not necessarily just providing off-the-shelf products that are the same products that have been available forever. If you think about it, how will you ever close the protection gap if you're just offering the exact same, not tailored product to everyone? Yeah. And so we believe that it does start with the product. It's a base product. It might be auto insurance. It might be homeowners insurance. It might be any form of insurance. But we have to remember that consumers in different parts of the world, or sometimes males and females, or sometimes digital savvy and non-digitally savvy individuals, all have different ways of interacting with the information that they're receiving and processing it and thinking about, does this solution make sense for me? So to me, it begins with really understanding the products that are out there, and then saying, how can I get really smart, really fast, and try to tailor that product to something that makes perfect sense to the consumer at the exact moment that they're trying to do a transaction, so that it is seamless for them. So they're buying something at their exact point of need that's been tailored to exactly what they need, and it is at an affordable price point.
Yeah. So I remember talking to Romney around 18 months ago, and at the time, I think bolttech was underwriting or, keeping premium of $50 billion. Today, when I look at some of the numbers, and maybe they've changed since I looked at them, so correct me, Rob, if I'm wrong.
They have it $70 billion now.
Yes, I saw $70 billion quoted premium annually, USD, and 39 markets, but that just in a few years. So that is remarkable. So what is the human story behind that scale?
Yeah, the human story behind it is one where I think we would say that we've been very true to understanding our North Star. So the vision of bolttech has never changed. We are here really on that mission that I described to you earlier, the vision I described for you earlier, which is we want to provide the connection points so that the customer can get more ways to protect the things that they value. Our mission of trying to close this global protection gap has never changed. And so if you start with the mission and the vision are super well known, then nothing will distract you, regardless of what's happening in the marketplace around you. Nothing will distract you from solving that problem. And then you can really deep dive into how do I get smart? How do I do this in a more technology savvy way? And how do I experiment in how to solve these problems of accessing distribution that people have struggled with for many, many years? And so, as you know, when you spoke with Romain, we use a lot of AI. We're using a lot of testing and a lot of different techniques because we're great experimenters. And we experiment and embrace that fail fast. I don't mind. I tell my team, don't be afraid to dent the car. Don't crash it. Let's not make this car undrivable, but drive it and drive it fast, because we're not going to solve this protection gap unless we move fast and we move at scale, right? So doing it by ourselves, not a great solution. Doing it slow and methodical, not a great solution. We understand our main mission, and we're moving fast, and we're willing to partner up with others in an ecosystem environment so that this is not all about us. It should never be about bolttech. As a matter of fact, you know, we position ourselves as an enabler, and we position ourselves as an enabler because it's not about bolttech solving the problem by itself. It's about us helping the people who are trying to solve the problem do it better, do it faster, enabling them to get to their end destination, which we've never lost track of. Let's close that protection gap, and let's make sure that we are providing that connection point so that people can protect the things that they value.
So you use the magic word. I think what I read is you're a connector, and I call myself a connector, right? I tend to work with carriers to build what we call the venture client model, so yes. Venture client lab, where the goal is to commercialize faster with young ventures, growth ventures, which became the first solution, and the carrier become the first client. So the focus is in commercialization rather than investment.
Yes.
And we have a different type of connectors, but what I find fascinating is you do not want to use the word distributor. The second point you actually made, which I think is important, is fail fast, experiment, test, learn. Don't crash the car, but, small dance allows us to learn to build the perfect product. So how does that change the DNA of our industry?
I believe that the industry's DNA is changing as we speak, because we're seeing this ecosystem concept being accepted, right? I came out of the industry, and sometimes our old approach was we can build it ourselves. Mm-hmm. We can solve it ourselves. And by the way, maybe we all can, but we shouldn't do this at the cost of moving at pace. This problem, this multi-trillion-dollar protection gap, is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so if everyone wants to solve it by themselves, it will only continue in that trend and in that direction. And so I believe that I'm seeing more and more collaboration, more and more cooperation, even more and more co-opetition, where sometimes we're cooperating with and collaborating with what would appear to be our competitor. We've allowed direct competitors to use some of our capabilities because that's an area of expertise for them, because they can move faster and because we really don't have an appetite to do what they're trying to do. And we can do a better solution for the world if we collaborate and we cooperate. I went to graduate school at the University of Pennsylvania, and our Wharton kind of theme was, you've got to cooperate to graduate. Mm-hmm. And if you were ever going to get through all of this, you will never do it by yourself. So I think that's the biggest change in the DNA of the industry. And I think that will be the key to success as we move forward.
Rob, you won't believe, but when I did my MBA in 2000, the book I had to read was Competition. And this year, I could not find my old book. I had to buy a new book, and it's the book which is on my desk at the moment, because our market, our world need to actually learn to co-compete, to actually collaborate, but at the same time find, the partners. And one key, I would say, trend I've seen amongst carriers is that some of them are already doing data as a service. So actually selling data to their competitors technically,
yes,
because they realize that will allow them to maybe underwrite better car insurance or other products where they are prime service provider of the industry. So a very big transformation for our industry. Some of the numbers I would like to repeat for everybody to really understand how fast your scale, because I discovered bolttech during COVID-19. So it was like 5 years of creation, of value creation. So bolttech scale shows the art of the impossible, what one can do in a very short period of time. You already manage something like 14 million active policies,
yes,
right? And we already said $70 billion a quoted premium per year across 39 markets. 5 years, people, 5 years, working over 700 distribution partners. So that is pure, connection creation. The model is delivering growth at speed. You are partnering with amazing partners, right? Generating around 250,000 policy per month. Am I right?
Yes.
Yes. Proof that embedding protection into everyday transaction can deliver rapid compound adoption. And lastly, you mentioned the protection gap, 181 billion in 2024, $1.8 trillion today that we need to manage, growing at speed. We need to do better. We need to do more. And your mission is to redesign distribution as a connector. So let's look at the great distribution shift. Insurance is quietly becoming invisible, Rob, integrating into telco, into mobility, into customer products. How do you think we will own the customer relationship in the future? Is it an ecosystem play or something else?
It's a great question. In the way that we think about it, we are B2B2C player, and we think that the distribution partner that we have, the one who has the customer today, that they own that customer journey. They own the customer experience. But of course, the insurance carrier owns the underwriting data, the underwriting knowledge, because they bring the expertise on pricing and on understanding the risk to the table. And of course, our role is to be the connective tissue between the two of them. And in many ways, we own a relationship even between the carrier and the distribution partner. And so someone owns some element of the value chain there, and the data and the customer relationship. But it may just be in a different form. The customer journey could be different than the actual customer underwriting or the customer pricing that you think of from the insurance carrier. So we have to be ready for an environment or for a model that recognizes the fact that it's not a one-size-fits-all answer, like only this party owns the data. If we don't share the data, if we don't use the data responsibly, then we are doing a disservice to the end customer. So I think the real important point here is whatever we do has to be done in a very thoughtful, highly regulated, highly controlled manner, so that we're not using data and retaining data from a customer that we really don't need, and that we're not exposing that data in ways that the customer didn't give us permission for. So that's what's really important. But this idea that we all sort of, in some ways, are touching the data of the customer and are owning an element of that relationship is something that I think will be the new paradigm and the new future.
But in some ways, what you are saying is we are moving from reach to relevance, and data is key. So we need to be clear around our contextual data. We need to understand the behavioral data we are using every day. So what does that mean when we start looking at reshaping underwriting and driving that customer trust?
But if you think about auto insurance as the prime example, you have telematics data, which can actually give you direct feedback directly about the driving behavior of the individual. Just like you can have in today's IoT world, you can have data about the vehicle coming directly back and feeding all of this information into the underwriting engine allows the underwriting to be that much more precise. It allows the underwriting to separate between good risk and bad risk, as opposed to this blanket pricing that covers across everyone in sort of a generic way. And the reason that this is important is because if we want to make insurance tailored, affordable, accessible, and convenient, we can't charge people for the sins of other people, right? We have to find a way to separate the truth from the myth and the fact from the fiction and the good customer from the not good customer. But there's this, without the data, there's this tendency to paint over everything with one brush as though it's all the same. So I think that this is very real to us today. The data is accessible to us today. And the data is even available on a real-time basis today. And it can be available with no intervention, where it feeds directly from the vehicle. It feeds directly from the telematics information about the unique driver. When you have all of those things, you can get a very different view on underwriting, a very different view on pricing, and you can get a very different ability of a customer to afford the insurance protection.
Recently, SAS and IDC published a report called Data and AI Impact Study. And the whole study is about the trust dilemma. And one of the stats which I thought was very interesting is that a lot of people today trust generative AI. We trust generative AI even though it's error prone. So when we start looking at building the product and services of the future, how can we ensure that we create product services which drive trust from the customer?
This is a very big puzzle that everyone's trying to solve. To the credit of the regulators around the world, they're trying to put frameworks in place that help us to give us a guiding principle. But the truth of the matter is the regulators are learning also. The regulators are working really hard to be coordinated because it's very difficult to operate in the world when one regulation is dramatically different from another regulation. But the truth is that in the end, the number one thing is that everyone who's behaving in this space has to behave as though they are a trustworthy user, a custodian of the data. And I think that there's no easy answer for this other than to say that from the bolttech perspective, we believe that everything in AI is going to be driven off of this idea of, does a customer even trust you to use AI to interact with them? And if they don't trust you for that, then AI won't be successful in that space because it won't be allowed in that space. It won't be accepted in that space. And it will come back ultimately to, do we do things the right way and give the customer the reason to trust us? It's just like our relationship. You will trust me because of my behavior over time. Customers will trust us because of our behavior over time. There will be rules around how we should behave. But in the end, we just need to behave. Yeah. And if we behave and we establish that trust relationship, the possibilities are endless.
Yeah, particularly when artificial intelligence at some point will likely become a utility. So many incumbents still measure success by premium underwritten, right? And I believe at bolttech, you seems to measure success by connections made. So how do we see KPIs evolving in our industry in the future?
KPIs will definitely evolve. Gross written premium, net written premium, these are relevant measures. They belong in your financial statements, for example. But if I really want to understand how successful I am at being able to make progress, then I'm going to have to measure other things, like even net promoter score. So what's the level of customer satisfaction that I have? What level of conversion rate do I get? when I have an opportunity to provide protection for customer, if no one's buying that protection, my conversion rate is low, am I really achieving anything? Because that's not really included in the gross written premium or net written premium number per se. Yes, that's an aggregate amount of premium that you've written, but it didn't tell me whether you could have written much more or whether you should have written much less. It doesn't tell me enough. And so I think that these data points are super important. We care about connections. We care about conversion. We care about customer satisfaction. We care about many things that maybe would have almost seemed like qualitative measures in the past, but they're not really just qualitative measures. These are, in fact, the metrics that we need to be using for the future in a world that's going to evolve away from the old way of doing things to the more modern approach that I think we will all need to accept.
So you actually, highlighted a few things. I want to summarize this section. We are in a market on the cusp of a breakthrough. Embedded insurance is forecast to grow at billion, but I think $1 trillion. I think the number we see at the moment around $700 billion by 2029. I saw a number at 1.5 trillion by 2032. So it's fast and it's growing. But now what we also see is the compound growth rate is 35%. So it's significant. So by 2030, which is a magic date, 5 years from now, that could account to 25% of the P&C market. This is significant. This is big. And so I think insurers out there, they need to really be clear that distribution is evolving. One thing you mentioned is around mobility and automotive, but also telco, the new distribution models, and the new market that we could go after. For example, connected cars are expected to represent 90% of new US vehicles sold this year. So with all this connected information, we can actually do better for the customer. And 81% of the millennial and Gen Z want to buy insurance embedded through their auto vehicle. So understanding the behavior of that segment will be critical if we want to win in the future. And again, the telco and data platform are the new insurers. I think they are actually liking our industry as utility platform. And so embedding our products and working with them as connectors and as partners will be critical for the success in the future. So let's try to reimagine protection. Can we think to 2030 now, Rob? If we move, and fast forward to 2030, what will protection look like for you in the future?
It's a great question. I think we're all trying to create that future today. We're all trying to imagine what it can be. But one thing that I really believe will be true is that we won't think of risk in so many isolated buckets. You can imagine with all of that data, the ability to almost underwrite an individual and everything about the individual's lifestyle. Wouldn't it be great? I know enough about you to know how I would think about your auto insurance, your homeowner's insurance, your casualty insurance, your health insurance, any of those things. Now, will that all happen by 2030? Probably not, but will we be making progress toward that? And will you see that picture clearer as we head toward 2030? In my view, absolutely yes. Because the pace of change, as you think about this issue of how fast the evolution of AI is, it is really moving fast. But everybody sort of always then poo-poos it and says, well, gosh, I don't see that many proof points today. Okay. Go back to the Ernest Hemingway book, The Sun Also Rises, from the 1920s. There's this one exchange in that book when they ask the question, how did you go bankrupt? And the answer was, at first slowly, and then suddenly.
A bit like the frogs.
So it seems like this is slow. But the truth of the matter is, this is slow. It's not that slow. And then you're going to wake up one day and there will have been this change. And so I believe we're on the precipice of this as we speak. I think it seems to many people as though this it is the frog, as you say, the frog in the water. It's, but the truth of the matter is that temperature is in fact going up. And I believe that you will find that change happens suddenly, even though it didn't happen suddenly. It was slowly and then suddenly.
Yeah. So as you are building a company at the intersection of technology, trust, and regulation, and you actually explain those three terms for us very eloquently, what ethical guardrails we need to think about when we start designing for the future? Do we design, compliance by design or trust by design? What should we be looking for?
Without a doubt, this trust factor is going to be central to our ability to succeed. And so the number one thing I would say is we have to make sure that we never jeopardize that by giving the appearance that we don't deserve that trust. And so I begin by saying, even if the rules don't require us to do something, you don't do everything in your life just because the rules didn't require you or did require you. You do what you think is right, and then you're guided by the rules. And I believe that the regulators will continue to work very hard to put those guardrails in. But the truth of the matter is, our ability as individual companies and as a marketplace to earn that trust, because we don't actually rely just on those guardrails, but instead we stay in the lanes on our own. Our car doesn't bump up against the side guardrails against the side of the road, but instead we stay within our lane. And we can stay within our lane quite easily. But I believe that this will require the judgment and the good behavior of the companies. That's very hard to measure. Yeah. But I do believe that it will be, in the end, this moral compass that society has, that the individuals have, that the company have, that will actually keep us on the road in the first place. If we have to rely simply on the regulators' rules to keep us in the right place, then I think we've done a misservice to everyone.
Are there principles for you who are non-negotiable to scale bolttech to the next level?
Absolutely. From our perspective, we really don't want anything that we could go back and say, boy, the headline in the Wall Street Journal, the headline in the paper, when we read that, was something that we really would not be proud of. And so we kind of always have this mentality of saying, how would that look if that was the headline of the paper? We want to always be guided on saying that headline should describe how proud we are and how good we've behaved and what a great result we've gotten, not the opposite. And so I think keep that headline litmus test in your mind as everyone behaves. That will be a good guide rail for you.
Yeah, I think I can visualize, often when we learn to position goals, it's like, write that PR announcement and what you want to see there and then work backwards and make sure that everything you do is aligned to that positive statement that the customer is going to see. So when we look today around the fact that we are all seeking digital convenience, but at the same time, we need to meet that customer trust. And we know that over half of customers prefer digital engagement. So what would be the recommendation you would give to people out there looking to really understand how insurance is going to serve them better in the future?
My goodness, I guess the very first thing that I would say is that that there is not a one-size-fits-all answer for how insurance products should be created, for how insurance products should be distributed, for how insurance products should be offered to customers. And that's why we believe in this way of thinking of it. Everything needs to be tailored, affordable, accessible, and convenient. And when we say tailored, we mean like hyper customized. Literally, it's not just the difference between what a male wants and a female wants, but it's also the cultural differences. It's also the general preferences of this particular part of the population. And so, to me, I think that we're going to end up getting a lot of hyper customization will be the future for what people should expect, and the future for what will actually help us to close the global protection gap.
So my final question is, Rob, imagine a world where insurance is not bought. We often say insurance is bought. It's lived now. It's lived. So what is one innovation, technology, a philosophy that you believe will redefine the next decade in our industry?
I think the number one technology that's going to define the next decade for sure is AI. To me, you're already seeing that happen today, but you're seeing it again in sort of incremental ways that don't allow people to see the entire picture. But for sure, if we continue on the path that we're on, we will find that it was slowly and then suddenly that we felt as though we experienced that change. And so to me, have faith that the technology can be your friend, that the technology can help us to solve some problems that we've not been able to solve before, but that we all need to behave within appropriate guidelines to make sure that we've earned the trust, or otherwise we're going to derail this entire experiment.
So I would like to talk to the investors, the carriers, the potential partners, telco, automotive, maybe other partners who might be out there interested in your business model. What would you like to tell them, and where can they find you?
I would tell them that InsurTech is for sure the place to watch within financial services. I would also tell them that within InsurTech, I really think that the bolttech model, what it stands out about us the most is that we are a global platform trying to solve big problems. It's very different if you're trying to solve problems in one specific geography or for one specific product, but instead solving big problems will make a big difference. What I think is beautiful about what we're trying to do is, if there is truly a multi-trillion-dollar protection gap, we don't need to fight anyone to win. What we need to do is find solutions to problems that have not otherwise been solved. That's really at the heart of what we're trying to do at bolttech. And the size of that prize is so great. And isn't it great to swim in a blue ocean where we're not always fighting against one another? And also, isn't it great to be involved with an ecosystem where everyone sees themselves as a partner in the ecosystem, or someone who helps the ecosystem perform even better? And so to me, the calling card of bolttech is, we are an ecosystem player. We are not the great disruptor. We are an enabler. We are a partner to so many in this industry, whether you're an incumbent carrier, whether you're another InsurTech, whether you're a distribution partner, it doesn't matter. We believe you play an important role in this value chain. And if you really want to win this game, don't be out there fighting for every little scrap that's on the table. Figure out how to solve the big problem. You figure out how to solve the big problem, which is what bolttech's trying to do. I believe you will then create value for everyone, and you will help to create value for society by closing this global protection gap. That's a real guiding principle for us. And that's why we think what we're doing is really valuable to society, and what we think is really valuable and really attractive to investors.
With 1.8 trillion protection gap, what I hear is there's space for everyone. With 700 billion of embedded insurance opportunity, which will occupy 25% of the P&C market, there is opportunity for a lot of people.
A lot.
So let's go for it. Thank you, Rob.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Scouting for Growth. Please subscribe, share with friends, and leave a 5-star rating. Your rating is so valuable. I review all of them and my team help me adapt content to meet your needs. Also connect with me on my preferred channels. I am a B2B growth expert, so you will find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Threads, and X as well as Blue Sky. All information available below. Until next, keep scouting for growth.